The rule that you must not need anything. The rule that you must not need anything is one of the first things a child learns in a house where needs were inconvenient. You asked for something once, and the answer was a sigh, or a sharp word, or a silence that told you the asking had cost someone something. So, you learn to want less. You learn to say you were fine before anyone had to ask. A child cannot leave, cannot find another home. So the only thing left to adjust is the size of their own needs, and children are very good at shrinking. What makes this so quietly lasting is that the rule does not expire. You are an adult now, in rooms where your needs would be met gladly, and still you hesitate before asking for anything at all. The most unsettling part is that you may not experience it as a rule. It feels like personality. You call yourself low maintenance, independent, easy to be around, never noticing that these were not traits you chose but conditions you accepted long ago in exchange for staying safe in a house where needing was the one thing you could not afford to do. The rule that silence keeps you safe. The rule that silence keeps you safe is one of the deepest things a child absorbs in a home where speaking up went badly. Maybe your words were used against you. Maybe the honest answer started an argument, and the argument lasted for days. So you learned to hold things in, to give the reply that ended the conversation, rather than the one that was true. Silence became a door you could close from the inside. Your nervous system recorded it as strategy, and strategies that once worked are the hardest to unlearn. What makes this so quietly costly is that the silence follows you into rooms where it is no longer needed. Someone asks what you think, and something in you edits the answer before it reaches your mouth. You call it being careful. The most unsettling part is what it does to intimacy. The people who love you now cannot reach a person who has been trained not to be reachable, and so they meet a calm, agreeable version of you, while the real one waits behind a door that a child locked a very long time ago, for reasons that no longer exist. The rule that love can be taken away. The rule that love can be taken away is one of the most destabilizing things a child can learn. It is not taught in words. It is taught in withdrawal, in the parent who went cold after a mistake, in the affection that vanished for a day and returned without explanation. And so you understood something no child should have to understand, that love is not a floor beneath you, but a thing that can be removed. Your mind stored this as a survival fact, and survival facts do not fade with age. What makes this so quietly haunting is what it does to good things. You cannot rest inside love, because part of you is always watching for the moment it is withdrawn again. Happiness arrives and you brace. The most unsettling part is how it teaches you to preempt the loss. You may leave first, test the person, or hold back a piece of yourself, so that if the love goes, it will not take all of you with it. You protect yourself from an abandonment that may never come, using a rule written by a child who is simply trying to understand why the warmth kept disappearing. The rule that you must read the room. The rule that you must read the room is one of the most exhausting skills a child develops in an unpredictable home. Before you knew what you were doing, you learned to check the air, the footsteps, the tone of a single word from the next room, calculating what kind of night this would be. It was not curiosity. It was radar. A child who cannot control the weather learns instead to predict it, and that early warning system can keep you safe for years. What makes this so quietly draining is that the radar never switches off. You walk into a room now and read it instantly. Mood, tension, who is upset, before you have any idea how you feel yourself. The most unsettling part is that people will praise you for it. They will call you intuitive, sensitive, wonderfully attuned, and none of them will see what it costs to become this way. Your empathy is real, but underneath it sits a child who learned to watch a face very carefully because the difference between a good evening and a bad one depended on seeing it coming. The rule that anger is dangerous. The rule that anger is dangerous is one of the most disarming things a child learns in a house where someone's temper filled every room. You saw what anger did. It broke things, ended conversations, changed the temperature of a home in a second. So, you decided, somewhere below thought, that you would never be that. And in deciding, you set down a part of yourself. Anger is a signal, the feeling that tells a person a line has been crossed, and a child who fears it learns to disconnect the alarm entirely. What makes this so quietly costly is that the signal does not disappear. It only goes underground. It shows up as tiredness, as a headache, as a strange flatness where a reaction should have been. The most unsettling part is what it does to your boundaries. Without access to anger, you cannot feel the moment someone takes too much, so you allow things you should not. And only later, quietly, wonder why you feel so hollow around certain people. You disarmed yourself as a child to keep the peace, and the disarmament held long after the war ended. The rule that their mood is your job. The rule that their mood is your job is one of the heaviest things a child can be handed. Somewhere along the way, you came to believe that if a parent was sad, you should fix it. That if they were angry, you had caused it. That the emotional temperature of the house was somehow yours to manage. So you became a small, tireless caretaker of feelings far too large for you. Children are natural egocentrists. They assume they are the cause of what happens around them, and a struggling adult can accidentally confirm that belief for years. What makes this so quietly lasting is that the job never formally ended. You are grown now, and still, when someone near you is unhappy, something in you goes to work, scanning, adjusting, trying to repair a mood you did not cause. The most unsettling part is the guilt when you cannot. Other people's feelings are not yours to fix, but no one told the child who kept the house calm, and so you carry a responsibility that was never yours, feeling like a failure every time another adult is simply allowed to have a bad day. The rule that good means invisible. The rule that good means invisible is one of the quietest wounds a child can carry out of a busy or overwhelmed home. You notice that the easy child got peace, that needing nothing was rewarded with calm, that the way to be loved was to take up as little room as possible. So you became good, which meant becoming small, and no one worried about you. And that was exactly the problem. A child who causes no trouble often receives no attention, and learns that being unnoticed is the price of being acceptable. What makes this so quietly sad is that the strategy worked. You were praised for it. The adults called you mature, easy, no trouble at all, never seeing the loneliness that sat underneath the compliment. The most unsettling part is how it follows you into every room since. You still shrink to be liked, still equate goodness with not being a bother, and some part of you still believes that if you took up your full space, you would stop being lovable. Because the only version of you that was ever safely loved was the one that barely showed up at all. The rule that rest must be earned. The rule that rest must be earned is one of the most tiring things a child can absorb from a home where stillness looked like laziness. You saw that being useful brought approval, and that sitting quietly brought a comment, a look, a task. So you learned to keep moving, to be helpful, to justify your presence with productivity. Rest became something you had to pay for in advance, and only ever in small amounts. What makes this so quietly exhausting is that the debt never clears. You are an adult with your own life now, and still, when you sit down, something in you itches, insists you have not done enough, that you have not yet earned the right to stop. The most unsettling part is what it makes of your worth. If rest must be earned, then your value lives entirely in your output, and a person like that can never simply exist, only perform. So you work, and you achieve, and you collapse, and you call it discipline, never seeing the child underneath who is still trying to be useful enough to be allowed to sit down. The rule that crying only makes it worse. The rule that crying only makes it worse is one of the loneliest lessons a child can learn. You cried once and were mocked for it, or punished, or told to stop, or simply met with a wall of indifference that taught you the tears changed nothing. So you learned to swallow them. You learned to feel the wave rise and press it back down. And eventually you got so good at it that the tears stopped coming even when you wanted them. What makes this so quietly costly is that crying is how a nervous system discharges pain, and a child who blocks it does not stop hurting, only stops releasing. The most unsettling part is what it means about the moment you learned it. Every child who stops crying has understood something devastating, that no one is coming to comfort them, that the sound of their own distress will not bring help. So they go quiet. And decades later, you may sit through something genuinely painful, dry-eyed and composed, wondering why you cannot feel it properly, never realizing you are following an instruction issued by a child who cried once and found the room empty. The rule that no one is coming. The rule that no one is coming is one of the most defining beliefs a child forms in a home where help did not arrive. You needed something, and you waited, and nothing came. Maybe it happened once, in a moment that mattered enormously. Maybe it happened slowly, 1,000 small times. Either way, the conclusion formed, quiet and absolute, that you are on your own, and a child who believes this becomes very capable, very early. What makes this so quietly isolating is that the capability is real. You can handle things. You do not fall apart. People rely on you, and no one worries about you, because you never look like you need anything. The most unsettling part is what it costs you. You cannot ask for help, because asking requires believing someone might come, and that belief was taken from you before you had the words for it. So, you carry everything, alone, and call it strength. And the people who would gladly help you never learn that you needed them. Because a child decided long ago that reaching out was pointless, and no one has managed to prove that child wrong since. The rule that you must be useful. The rule that you must be useful is one of the most conditional things a child can learn about love. Somewhere you got the message that you were valued for what you provided. The good grades, the help, the achievements, the being easy, and that the affection followed the usefulness rather than you. So you became someone who gives, constantly, because the giving felt like the rent you paid to stay. What makes this so quietly corrosive is that you can never stop. If love follows usefulness, then any moment of being ordinary is a moment of being at risk. So you overwork, overgive, and overfunction in every relationship you have. The most unsettling part is that it makes real love feel unsafe. When someone offers affection with nothing asked in return, you do not relax, you get suspicious, or you rush to repay it, because a gift with no invoice does not fit the rule you were raised on. You have spent your life earning something that was supposed to be free, and the exhaustion of that arrangement feels, to you, simply like being a responsible person. The rule you never knew you learned. The rule you never knew you learned is the quiet architecture beneath all the others. Nobody sat you down and taught you these things. There was no lesson, No sentence you could point to, only 1,000 small moments that a child interpreted and turned into law. And because you never saw it being written, the rule does not feel like a rule at all. It feels like reality, like simply how things are. What makes this so quietly powerful is that you cannot question something you cannot see. A belief you know you hold can be examined, but a belief that hides inside your personality just runs silently, deciding things for you. The most unsettling part is how loyal you have remained to laws written by a child. That child was doing something remarkable. They were reading an impossible situation and finding a way to survive it, and they succeeded, which is why you are here. But they wrote the rules with the information they had, in a house you no longer live in, for a danger that has long since passed, and no one ever told them the rules could be rewritten. The love that came with conditions. The love that came with conditions is one of the most defining things a child can inherit. It was never announced. No one told you the affection had terms. You simply noticed that the warmth arrived when you did well, and thinned when you did not. And a child does not question that pattern. They adapt to it. So, you learn to meet the conditions, whatever they were, because meeting them was how you got held. What makes this so quietly lasting is that it teaches you a definition of love that is really a definition of work. Love becomes something you perform rather than something you receive, and performances are exhausting, and they can always be failed. The most unsettling part is what it does when love finally comes freely. As an adult, someone may care for you with nothing asked in return, and instead of relief, you feel unease, a low suspicion that the invoice is coming, that you have not yet paid for this. You keep waiting for the terms to be revealed, never quite believing there are none, because the child in you has never once seen love arrive without a price attached to it. The praise that followed only results. The praise that followed only results is one of the most shaping things a child can learn to live on. You brought home something good, a grade, a trophy, a win, and the room lit up. You brought home an ordinary day, and nothing happened. So you understood, without anyone saying it, that you were noticed for what you produced, not for who you were. And a child will chase that light for the rest of their life. What makes this so quietly hollow is that the light never stays. Achievement gives a flash of being seen, and then it fades, and you need another one, bigger, sooner. So you climb endlessly from one accomplishment to the next, never arriving. The most unsettling part is what happens when you finally reach something big. The moment lands strangely empty because it was never the achievement you wanted. You wanted the thing that was supposed to come with it, the being loved for existing. And no result, however large, can retroactively give a child what they should have received for free. The warmth that could go cold. The warmth that could go cold is one of the most destabilizing patterns a child can grow up inside. One moment you were adored, and the next, for a reason you could not identify, the warmth was simply gone. The face changed, the voice flattened, and you were left searching your own behavior for the crime. Nothing was ever explained, so you built a theory, and the theory was always about you. What makes this so quietly damaging is the unpredictability, not the coldness. A child can adapt to almost anything consistent, but a warmth that comes and goes without warning teaches the nervous system that safety is temporary and can be revoked at any second. The most unsettling part is how it lives in your body now. You can be in a good moment, genuinely loved, and still feel a low hum of watchfulness, waiting for the temperature to drop. You never learned to rest inside affection, because the affection you knew first was weather, beautiful, and unpredictable, and you spent your childhood learning to read the sky. The hug you had to deserve. The hug you had to deserve is one of the smallest and heaviest wounds a child can carry. Affection was not simply given in your house. It came after something, after the good behavior, after the achievement, after you had made yourself worth the touch. Or it came only when you were sick, or crying hard enough to justify it. So you learned that comfort required a reason. What makes this so quietly sad is what it does to your relationship with tenderness. Physical closeness stops being something you can just have and becomes something you must qualify for. And a child who must qualify for a hug learns to stop reaching for one. The most unsettling part is how it survives in an adult body. You may find affection uncomfortable now, or need a reason to accept it, or feel a strange guilt when someone holds you for no occasion at all. Some part of you is still checking whether you have done enough today to be allowed this, still unsure that closeness can simply be offered freely to a person who did nothing to earn it. The approval that never arrived. The approval that never arrived is one of the longest hungers a childhood can create. There was someone whose approval you needed, and you worked for it, and it never came, or came so rarely that each drop kept you working for years. Maybe there was always a note of criticism attached. Maybe the goalpost moved. So you kept trying. Because a child cannot accept that the approval is not available, it is easier to believe you have not yet done enough. What makes this so quietly relentless is that the hunger outlives the source. That person may be gone now, or changed, or completely unaware, and still you are working. Still trying to satisfy an audience that stopped watching long ago. The most unsettling part is who you may have become in the chase. You may have built a whole life aimed at a nod that was never going to come, choosing a career, a shape, a version of yourself designed for someone whose approval was never really about you at all and was never yours to earn. The good enough you never reached. The good enough you never reached is one of the most exhausting standards a child can inherit. Whatever you did, there was a small correction, a note on what could have been better, a but attached to the praise. You brought a near-perfect result and heard about the missing piece. So, you learned that there is a line called good enough, and that you live permanently just below it. What makes this so quietly cruel is that the line was never real. It was not a standard you could meet, only a way of speaking, a habit of another person's mind, and yet you took it as a measurement of yourself. The most unsettling part is how you carry the line now. No one has to criticize you anymore. You do it yourself, automatically, finding the flaw in your own work before anyone else can, always seeing what fell short. And so, achievement brings no rest, because you are still measuring your life against a line that was never drawn to be crossed, only to keep a child reaching. The grades that bought you warmth. The grades that bought you warmth are one of the clearest exchanges a child can learn. The report card came home, and the mood of the house followed it. A good one bought you a warm evening. A bad one bought you distance, disappointment, a long silence at the table. And so, school stopped being about learning and became a currency, the thing you traded for a peaceful home. What makes this so quietly distorting is that it fuses your worth to your performance at an age when you cannot possibly separate them. You were not being praised for effort or curiosity. You were being paid for output. The most unsettling part is where the exchange rate followed you. Now, it is your job, your salary, your visible success that buys the warmth. And a bad quarter can make you feel unlovable in a way that has nothing to do with work. You are still bringing home a report card, still watching a face to see what kind of evening you have earned, decades after the last one was signed. The child you were compared to. The child you were compared to is one of the quietest injuries a household can hand out. There was a sibling, a cousin, a neighbor's kid, someone held up beside you as the version you should be, and every comparison told you the same thing, that as you are not quite it. Maybe it was meant as motivation. It landed as a verdict. What makes this so quietly corrosive is that the comparison teaches you to locate your value outside yourself, in the gap between you and someone else, which means you can never simply be, only rank. The most unsettling part is that the comparing never ended. You do it yourself now, all day, against colleagues, friends, strangers on a screen, always measuring, always finding the gap. You call it ambition. But underneath it is a child standing beside another child, being told, in the gentlest possible voice, that they would be lovable if only they were slightly different. The love you had to compete for. The love you had to compete for is one of the loneliest arrangements a child can grow up inside. There was not enough attention to go around, so it became something to win from a parent in a full house against a sibling who needed it just as badly. And you got good at competing, or you gave up entirely. And either way, you learned that affection is a scarce resource. What makes this so quietly damaging is what it does to other people. A child who competes for love learns to see the people closest to them as rivals, and that lens does not come off easily. The most unsettling part is how it lives in your adult relationships. You may feel a flash of threat when your partner enjoys someone else's company, or when a friend has other friends. A quiet certainty that love given elsewhere is love taken from you. You are still in a house where there was not enough, still bracing for a shortage, in a life that may have plenty. The apology you always gave first. The apology you always gave first is one of the most reflexive things a child learns in a home where conflict was unbearable. Someone was angry, and the fastest way back to safety was for you to be sorry, whether or not you had done anything. So you apologized first, always, because the apology ended the tension, and ending the tension was the only thing that mattered. What makes this so quietly costly is that it trained you to accept fault as a tool. You learned to take blame not because it was yours, but because it worked. And after enough years, you stopped being able to tell the difference. The most unsettling part is what it means in adulthood. You apologize before you have thought about whether you were wrong. You take responsibility for other people's moods, other people's mistakes, other people's bad days, and each time you do, you quietly confirm to yourself that you are the one who is usually at fault. The reflex that once bought you peace now costs you the ability to know when you are innocent. The silence used as punishment. The silence used as punishment is one of the most frightening things a child can be given. Not shouting, not a hand raised, just an adult who stopped speaking to you, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, and would not say why. And you were left in a house with someone who was there and not there, waiting for the thaw, with no idea what would bring it. What makes this so quietly terrifying is what silence means to a child's nervous system. It is not the absence of noise. It is the withdrawal of connection, which to a small human reads as danger. So the body goes on alert until the bond is restored. The most unsettling part is how it shaped what you do with distance now. When someone goes quiet, you may panic, over-apologize, or work frantically to fix a rupture that might be nothing at all. Or you may use the same weapon yourself, without meaning to. Either way, a silence in your house was never just a silence, and no silence has ever felt neutral since. The love that was never free. The love that was never free is one of the most quietly distorting things a child can be raised on. Everything came with a cost. Affection was traded for behavior, warmth for achievement, closeness for compliance, and so love, in your mind, became a transaction rather than a gift. You do not remember agreeing to this. You simply learned the exchange rate before you learned to read. What makes this so quietly heavy is that it changes what you can receive. A person raised on transactional love cannot rest inside the unconditional kind because it does not compute. It feels like a mistake, or a trap, or a debt, accumulating quietly in the dark. The most unsettling part is how it makes you love others. You may find yourself doing the same arithmetic, giving in order to be owed, keeping a quiet ledger you never meant to keep, offering warmth in exchange for something, because no one ever showed you what love looks like when there is nothing to pay. The debt you are still paying. The debt you are still paying is what remains when a child concludes that they must earn their place. Somewhere in those early years, you decided that your existence had to be justified, that you owed the people around you something in exchange for being kept, and you have been paying ever since. You overwork, overgive, overfunction, always slightly ahead of an invoice no one has actually sent. What makes this so quietly relentless is that the debt has no principle. There is no total, no schedule, no final payment, because it was never a real debt, only a child's explanation for why love felt so conditional. So it can never be cleared. The most unsettling part is who set the terms. Not a cruel person necessarily, and not on purpose, but somewhere a small child watched the adults around them and concluded that they had to be worth it. And that child is still paying, quietly, decades on, for a place at a table that was always, in truth, already theirs. The anger you learn to swallow. The anger you learn to swallow is one of the first feelings a child gives up in a house where anger belonged to someone else. You were not allowed to be furious. Your anger was called disrespect, or a tantrum, or an attitude, and it was met with something bigger than itself. So you learned to press it down before it reached your face. What makes this so quietly costly is that anger is information. It is the feeling that tells a person a line has been crossed, and a child who cannot feel it grows into an adult who cannot locate their own limits. The most unsettling part is that the anger did not go anywhere. It went down, into the body, where it became a tight jaw, a bad stomach, a strange fatigue that no amount of sleep touches. Or it comes out sideways, at the wrong person, over something small, in a burst that shocks you as much as anyone. You are not an angry person, you tell yourself. But there is a child inside you holding a feeling they were never allowed to put down, and it has been getting heavier for a very long time. The sadness you had to hide. The sadness you had to hide is one of the loneliest things a child can learn to carry. Your sadness was inconvenient. It made someone uncomfortable or worried or impatient, and you saw their face change when you brought it to them. So you learned to take it away, to be sad, somewhere else, quietly, where it would not cost anyone anything. What makes this so quietly isolating is that sadness is a bid for connection. A child cries so that someone comes, and a child who learns that no one comes does not stop being sad. They simply stop showing it. And grief without a witness has nowhere to go. The most unsettling part is how good you got at it. You can be devastated now, genuinely, and still function, still answer emails, still smile at the right moments, and no one around you has any idea. You call it being strong. But it started as a child who took their sadness into another room because they understood, without being told, that it was not welcome in this one. The fear no one would hold. The fear no one would hold is one of the most formative gaps in a childhood. You were afraid of something, the dark, a sound, a person, a thing you could not explain, and you brought it to an adult, and they did not take it from you. Maybe they laughed. Maybe they told you it was nothing. Maybe they were afraid themselves. And so, you were left alone, with a feeling too big for the body holding it. What makes this so quietly shaping is that this is how a nervous system learns to regulate. A child cannot calm themselves. They borrow the calm of an adult. And if no calm is offered, the fear does not resolve. It simply gets stored. The most unsettling part is that you may still be storing it. Adults who were never held through fear often do not know how to be soothed at all, so they meet panic alone, at 3 in the morning, exactly as they did at 6, waiting for a steadiness that never came then, and does not know how to arrive now. The joy that was too loud. The joy that was too loud is one of the saddest small losses of a difficult childhood. You were happy about something, genuinely, uncontainably, and you brought it into the room, and the room did not want it. You were too much, too loud, told to settle down, or met with a flat look that took the air out of it. And so you learned that even happiness had a volume limit. What makes this so quietly damaging is that a child's joy is meant to be reflected back. That is how they learn their delight is welcome in the world. Joy that meets a blank face does not just deflate, it teaches. The most unsettling part is what you do with good news now. You may minimize it, deliver it flatly, brace before sharing it, or feel a strange embarrassment about wanting anything too visibly. You have edited your own happiness down to a size that will not bother anyone, and you did it so long ago that you cannot remember what the full volume version ever sounded like. The need you learn to deny. The need you learn to deny is one of the quietest amputations a childhood can perform. You needed something: attention, food, comfort, help, and the need was treated as a problem, a burden, an inconvenience. So you did the only thing a child can do: you stopped feeling it. Not stopped having it. Stopped feeling it. What makes this so quietly effective is that the mind can genuinely turn the signal off. You do not walk around wanting things you cannot have. You simply lose access to the wanting, which looks, from the outside, like contentment. The most unsettling part is what it cost you as an adult. Ask someone like this what they want for dinner, where they want to go, what they need from a relationship, and the answer is honestly, sincerely, I don't mind, not politeness. An empty room where the preference should be. You cannot ask for what you need because the child in you disconnected the wire, and the wanting has been silent so long you have mistaken the silence for peace. The jealousy you were ashamed of. The jealousy you were ashamed of is one of the most secret feelings a child can carry. You felt it toward a sibling who got more, a friend who had easier parents, a classmate whose life looked warm, and you knew immediately it was ugly, so you buried it. You were told not to be jealous. You were told to be grateful. And so a completely natural feeling became evidence that something was wrong with you. What makes this so quietly corrosive is that jealousy in a child is not greed, it is a signal. It says something is missing, and I can see it in someone else's hands. Shaming, it does not remove the lack. It just adds guilt on top. The most unsettling part is what it does to you now. You may feel a flash of resentment at other people's good news and then hate yourself for it, doubling the pain. When the flash was only ever an old child pointing at something they needed and never got, still trying to tell you where the hole is. The excitement that got dimmed. The excitement that got dimmed is one of the quietest thefts of an unenthusiastic household. You came running with something, an idea, a plan, a dream, something you loved, and it was met with practicality. That's not realistic. That won't make money. We'll see. Nobody was cruel about it. They were just tired or worried or unable to be delighted. And your excitement, which arrived enormous, left the room smaller than it came in. What makes this so quietly shaping is that enthusiasm is fragile in a child. It needs a mirror, someone whose face lights up too. And without that mirror, it learns to stay in. The most unsettling part is that you may have stopped bringing things out entirely. As an adult, you might keep your ideas private until they are proven, guard your dreams from everyone, or find that you cannot get properly excited about anything anymore. Because somewhere a child learned that the safest thing to do with a bright feeling is to keep it where no one can dim it. The loneliness you could not name. The loneliness you could not name is one of the strangest hurts of a childhood that looked fine from outside. You were not neglected in any way anyone could point to. There were people in the house. There was food and a bed and a school run. And still, you were profoundly alone, in a way you had no words for and no evidence to justify. What makes this so quietly confusing is that loneliness is not about proximity. A child can be surrounded and unseen, in a full house where nobody ever asked what they were thinking, and there is no vocabulary for that at 7 years old, only a feeling. The most unsettling part is the guilt that came with it. You could not name the lack, so you decided it was your fault, that you were ungrateful, that something in you was simply broken. And you may still believe that now, in a good life, with people who love you, feeling an old ache you have never been able to explain to anyone, including yourself. The disappointment you swallowed. The disappointment you swallowed is one of the most repeated small wounds of a childhood built on broken promises. Someone said they would come, and they did not. Something was promised, and it quietly never happened. And you learned very fast that showing your disappointment made it worse, that it made the adult defensive, or angry, or sad, and then you had to manage that too. So you said it was fine. What makes this so quietly formative is what it teaches about expectation. A child disappointed enough times does not keep hoping. They lower the hope preemptively, so the fall is never that far again. The most unsettling part is how it looks in adulthood. You call it being realistic. You do not get your hopes up. You expect people to cancel, and when they do, there is a grim little satisfaction in having known. You have protected yourself so thoroughly from disappointment that you have made joy nearly impossible, and you learned to do it while you were still small enough to be carried. The hurt you called nothing. The hurt you called nothing is one of the most practiced sentences of a difficult childhood. Something painful happened, and you were asked if you were okay, and you said yes, automatically, before you had even checked. Or no one asked, and you told yourself the same thing anyway. It's fine. It's nothing. It doesn't matter. What makes this so quietly damaging is that you were not lying. After enough repetition, the dismissal becomes real. The hurt genuinely stops registering, and you lose the ability to know when you have been wounded. The most unsettling part is who this leaves you defenseless against. If you cannot feel a small hurt, you cannot notice a pattern of them. So you stay in situations far longer than you should, unable to point to anything serious, only a vague heaviness you cannot explain. You are still saying it's nothing, decades later, in a voice you learned from a child who understood that naming the hurt would only make the room worse. The feelings you had no words for. The feelings you had no words for are one of the most invisible gaps a childhood can leave. Nobody in your house named things. No one said you seemed disappointed, or that must have been frightening, or you're allowed to be angry about that. Feelings simply happened, unlabeled, like weather, and you were left inside them with no mouth. What makes this so quietly disabling is that words are how a child learns to sort experience. Naming a feeling makes it a thing that can be held and set down, and a child given no names does not get calmer. They get flooded, because everything arrives at once as one large, undifferentiated wave. The most unsettling part is what this looks like now. You may struggle to answer the simplest question, how do you feel? Not because you feel nothing, but because you feel a great deal and have no idea what any of it is called. There is a whole vocabulary you were never handed, and you have been trying to describe your inner life without it, your entire adult existence. The face you learn to wear. The face you learn to wear is one of the most useful things a child develops in an unsafe home, and one of the hardest things to take off. You learn to look fine, to be pleasant, to keep your expression neutral no matter what was happening inside, because a visible feeling could invite attention you did not want. And you got very, very good at it. What makes this so quietly isolating is that the mask works. People believe it. They see the calm face and assume the calm interior. And so you are never asked, never checked on, never noticed, which is exactly what you designed it for and exactly what makes it lonely. The most unsettling part is that you may not be able to find the edge of it anymore. After 30 years, it is difficult to tell where the face ends and you begin. And when someone asks you to be honest about how you feel, you may reach for the answer and find only the mask, smiling back at you, waiting to be told what to say. The feelings that went underground. The feelings that went underground are where all the others in this chapter ended up. Nothing you buried was destroyed. The anger, the sadness, the fear, the joy, the need, none of it left. It simply moved somewhere you could not see it and kept living there. What makes this so quietly powerful is that buried feelings do not stay quiet. They just stop asking permission. They surface as insomnia, as a body that will not relax, as a flat grayness where a life should be, as tears that arrive at a television advert and not at a funeral. The most unsettling part is what the burial cost. A child cannot hide one feeling selectively. The same switch dims all of them. So in learning not to feel the unbearable things, you also lost easy access to the good ones. And that is the strange bargain a child makes to survive a house, trading the whole range of their inner life for safety and paying the installments quietly for decades in a currency they never agreed to. The role you never auditioned for. The role you never auditioned for is one of the strangest things a family hands a child. Nobody sat you down and cast you. You simply arrived in a house that already had a shape, with gaps that needed filling and jobs nobody had claimed, and a small child is remarkably good at reading a room and becoming what it seems to need. So, you became the calm one, or the funny one, or the difficult one, and the family settled around that shape. What makes this so quietly powerful is that the role gets mistaken for a personality. Everyone, including you, comes to believe it is simply who you are, not a position you took to keep a system running. The most unsettling part is how hard the family resists any change to it. Try to be different at a holiday dinner and watch how quickly everyone steers you back to your old part. A role that a child took on to survive becomes a costume the whole family expects, and you have been wearing it so long that taking it off feels less like freedom and more like disappearing. The little adult in the house. The little adult in the house is one of the loneliest roles a child can be given. You were mature for your age. Everyone said so, proudly. You were sensible. You could be talked to like a grown-up. And it felt like a compliment, so you never noticed the cost, which is that being treated as an adult meant you stopped being treated as a child. What makes this so quietly damaging is what got skipped. Childhood is not just a period of time. It is a set of experiences. Being silly, being cared for, being allowed to not know things. And a child promoted early does not get those back later. The most unsettling part is how it looks now. You are competent, dependable, the person everyone brings problems to, and underneath it there is a strange, unnameable tiredness and a resentment you feel guilty for. You were praised for skipping your own childhood, and nobody ever mentioned that the praise was for a loss. The peacekeeper between them. The peacekeeper between them is one of the most exhausting jobs a child can hold. Two adults could not manage themselves, so you stood in the middle, reading the temperature, changing the subject, being charming at exactly the right moment, absorbing tension so the house would not break. It was not a choice. A child in a house of conflict does not choose to be a diplomat. They become one because the alternative is unbearable. What makes this so quietly costly is that the job never worked. You could not actually fix them, so you failed nightly at a task that was never yours. And children do not conclude the task was impossible. They conclude that they were not good enough at it. The most unsettling part is how you still do it. In any room with tension, something in you activates, scanning, smoothing, redirecting, taking on a job nobody asked you to do, still trying to keep a peace in a house you moved out of decades ago. The golden child's quiet cage. The golden child's quiet cage is the wound nobody believes you have. You were the favorite. You got the praise, the attention, the belief, and everyone assumes that means you were fine. What they do not see is the condition attached to it. The love was for your performance, your promise, your reflection on the family, and it could be lost. What makes this so quietly trapping is that a golden child cannot fail. There is no room to be ordinary, no permission to struggle, because the whole arrangement depends on you being exceptional. So you carry a pressure with no relief valve and no sympathy, because who feels sorry for the favorite? The most unsettling part is that the cage is made of good things. Praise, pride, high hopes, all of it locking you in so you cannot even name it as a wound, and neither can anyone else, and you have spent your life terrified of the moment you finally disappoint the people who love you for being the one who never does. The one who is always blamed. The one who is always blamed is the other side of the same house. Every family under strain needs somewhere to put its pain, and you were where it went. You were the difficult one, the problem, the reason things were tense, and the household organized itself around that story. What makes this so quietly unjust is that the role usually goes to the most honest child, the one who noticed the problem, who said the true thing out loud, who would not pretend everything was fine. Your clarity was inconvenient, so it was renamed as trouble. The most unsettling part is that you may still believe them. A child cannot hold the idea that the whole family is wrong about them. It is far too frightening, so they take the story inside and carry it as identity. And you may be an adult now, still convinced you are somehow the difficult one, still apologizing for taking up space, never seeing that you were simply the one who told the truth in a house that needed everyone to lie. The child nobody worried about. The child nobody worried about is one of the quietest kinds of neglect. You were fine. That was your job. There was a sibling who needed more, a parent who was struggling, a crisis that took all the air, and you were the one who was okay, so nobody checked. And you were not okay, but the family had no capacity to find out, and you knew it, so you never told them. What makes this so quietly damaging is that it works both ways. You get no attention, and you also get the message that your needs are the ones that can safely be skipped. The most unsettling part is the loyalty you show it now. You still deflect concern. When someone asks how you are, you redirect to them. You still make yourself the easy one, the low-maintenance one, the one nobody has to worry about, keeping a promise you made silently at 8 years old to a family that never noticed you made it. The therapist your parent needed. The therapist your parent needed is one of the heaviest roles a child can be handed. A parent told you things you were far too young to hear. Their marriage, their loneliness, their fears about money, their disappointments, their anger at someone else in the house. And you listened, because they needed you to, and because it felt like closeness, like being chosen. What makes this so quietly damaging is the reversal at its center. A child is supposed to bring their fears to a parent, not receive a parent's. And when it flips, the child loses their safe place entirely. Because the person who is meant to hold them is the one being held. The most unsettling part is how it disguised itself as intimacy. It felt special. It felt like trust. But a child cannot carry an adult's inner life without setting down their own. And you may still be doing it now, in every relationship, absorbing everyone's weather and never once asking who is holding yours. The child who raised the others. The child who raised the others is one of the most quietly heroic roles a family can extract. There were younger siblings, and someone had to feed them, calm them, get them to school, be there at night, and it fell to you, because the adults could not or would not. So you did it, and you did it well, and the family survived because you did. What makes this so quietly unfair is that everyone kept the benefit, and nobody carried the cost. Your siblings may not even remember. Your parents may tell the story as a nice thing about family closeness. Only you know what it took, and you were 11. The most unsettling part is what you never got back. You cannot unraise children, cannot reclaim the years, and often you cannot even feel angry about it, because you love them. And the love makes the resentment feel like a betrayal. So you carry both, quietly, forever, and call it just how things were. The family's secret keeper. The family's secret keeper is one of the most isolating jobs a child can be given. There was something the house did not talk about. An addiction, an illness, a parent's temper. Something that happened once, and the rule, never stated, was that it did not exist outside these walls. So you learn to carry it, to answer questions at school with a smooth face, to be a child with a locked room inside them. What makes this so quietly corrosive is that secrecy separates. A child holding a family secret cannot be fully known by anyone, cannot invite friends in, cannot say the true thing, and so they are alone in a specific and total way. The most unsettling part is the loyalty it demands. You protected the people who caused the thing you were hiding, and you did it out of love, and no one ever thanked you, because thanking you would mean admitting there was something to hide. You may still be keeping it now, out of habit, for people who long ago stopped needing you to. The one who held it together. The one who held it together is the role that gets mistaken for strength. When things fell apart, you did not. You made the arrangements, you stayed calm, you kept everyone functioning, and everybody said, "Thank God for you. You are so strong." And nobody asked what it cost, because your competence made the question invisible. What makes this so quietly damaging is that the role has no off switch. If you fall apart, the whole system falls apart, so you are not allowed to, ever. And a person who is never allowed to break does not stop breaking. They just do it privately, at 3 in the morning, where it will not inconvenience anyone. The most unsettling part is who ends up alone. The strong one is never held. Everyone leans on you and nobody checks on you, because you have built a version of yourself so reliable that people forget it as a person, and you helped build that impression. And now, you cannot find a way to tell anyone the truth. The mirror for someone's ego. The mirror for someone's ego is one of the strangest roles a child can be given. You are not really a person in that house. You are a reflection, proof of a parent's success, an extension of their image, and your achievements mattered because of what they said about them. What makes this so quietly erasing is that it looks like attention. There was interest in your life, pride in your results, involvement in your choices, and all of it was pointed slightly past you at what you meant rather than who you were. The most unsettling part is what happened when you differed. A mirror is only useful while it reflects, so the moment you wanted something of your own, something that did not fit the image, the interest cooled or turned to anger. And so you learned that being yourself was a betrayal, and you may still be making choices designed to reflect well on someone who was never actually looking at you. The role you still play today. The role you still play today is what happens when a child's job outlives the house it was needed in. You are grown now. The family may be scattered, changed, gone. And still you walk into every room and reach for the same part, the peacekeeper, the strong one, the invisible one, the one who fixes things, because it is the only way you have ever known to be safe among people. What makes this so quietly limiting is that the role is a strategy, not a self. It was brilliant once. It got a child through something. But strategies are built for specific dangers, and you are running yours in rooms that hold no danger at all. The most unsettling part is the question hiding underneath it. If you set the role down, if you stopped being the strong one or the easy one or the fixer, you do not actually know who would be standing there. And that not knowing is precisely why the costume stays on, decade after decade, in a play that everyone else stopped performing a long time ago. The voice that was never yours. The voice that was never yours is the strangest thing a child carries out of a house. Listen to how you speak to yourself when you make a mistake. The tone, the word choice, the particular contempt. Now ask where you learned it, because you did not invent it. A child does not arrive with a cruel inner voice. They absorb one from someone whose disappointment they could not survive. And after enough repetition, the voice stops sounding like that person and starts sounding like the truth. What makes this so quietly powerful is the disguise. You experience it as your own judgment, your own honest assessment, when it is a recording made long ago by someone who is not in the room. The most unsettling part is what happens if you listen closely. Sometimes you can hear whose voice it actually is. The phrasing, the exact words. A sentence from a kitchen 30 years ago, still playing, still landing, still believed, spoken by someone who probably does not even remember saying it. The critic who moved in. The critic who moved in is what happens when a child finds a way to survive constant correction. If someone is always going to find the flaw, the only defense is to find it first. So you built an internal critic to beat them to it. It was clever. If you condemned yourself before they could, their words had less power, and you kept a fragment of control. What makes this so quietly permanent is that the critic outlived the threat. The person is gone. The house is gone. The danger is gone. But the critic has a job, and it keeps doing it, faithfully, every day, on a threat that stopped existing decades ago. The most unsettling part is that you may defend it. Some part of you believes the critic is what keeps you good, that without it, you would become lazy, arrogant, unbearable. And so, you protect the thing that hurts you, mistaking a survival tool for a moral compass, keeping a guard at a gate that no longer has a wall. The words you still hear. The words you still hear are the ones that were said once and never taken back. A sentence, in a moment of frustration about who you are. Not what you did, who you are. And the person who said it may have forgotten it by dinner, but you are still carrying it. Because a child cannot fact-check an adult. What makes this so quietly enduring is a simple asymmetry. It takes a great many kind words to build a belief, and a single cruel one, said at the right age by the right person, to install one permanently. The most unsettling part is where those words live now. They are not memories anymore. They have been promoted into facts about yourself, so deep in the foundation that you no longer see them as things someone said. You experience them as things that are simply true, and you will defend them, if challenged, without ever noticing that you are defending someone else's bad moment from a long time ago. The standard you cannot meet. The standard you cannot meet is one of the cruelest inheritances of a critical home. It is not a high standard. High standards can be met. This one is a moving line, always positioned just past wherever you currently stand, so that arrival is structurally impossible. What makes this so quietly exhausting is that you keep trying anyway. Each achievement briefly promises to be the one that finally settles it, and each time, the line has already moved, and you feel not triumph but a strange emptiness, and you set a new target. The most unsettling part is what the standard was actually for. It was never about excellence. It was a way for someone to manage their own anxiety, or their own disappointment, or their own unmet life, and it had almost nothing to do with you. You inherited a measuring stick built for somebody else's fear, and you have been failing to reach the end of it your entire adult life. The name they called you once. The name they called you once is one of the smallest and most permanent wounds a childhood can leave. Lazy, selfish, dramatic, difficult, too sensitive. One word, said in anger, that landed somewhere deep and stayed. What makes this so quietly shaping is what a label does to a child. Adults name reality. When a grown-up tells a 7-year-old what they are, the child does not evaluate the claim. They absorb it, and then they organize their behavior around it forever after. The most unsettling part is how you have spent your life responding to it. If you were called selfish, you may have become compulsively generous, giving past exhaustion, never able to prove the word wrong enough. If you were called lazy, you may work until you break. The label did not just hurt you. It set the direction of your life, and you have been arguing with a single word from a single bad evening ever since, without ever quite winning. The joke that was not a joke. The joke that was not a joke is one of the most confusing wounds a family can hand out. Something true and cruel was said about you, in front of people, wrapped in laughter, and when your face fell, you were told to lighten up, that it was only a joke, that you were too sensitive. What makes this so quietly damaging is the trap built into the format. The joke delivers the wound and simultaneously forbids you from reacting to it, because reacting would prove the accusation that you cannot take a joke. So you had to laugh at your own hurt. The most unsettling part is what it did to your instincts. You learned that your accurate perception, that this was meant to sting, was wrong, that you were misreading things. And you may still do that now, still talk yourself out of your own reactions, still assume you are being too sensitive, having been trained by laughter to distrust the one instrument that was working perfectly. The look that said enough. The look that said enough is proof that a wound does not need words. There was a face in your childhood that could change a room without a sound. The flat stare, the tightened mouth, the slow turn of the head. And you learned to read it instantly, because reading it correctly was how you knew what was coming. What makes this so quietly powerful is that a look cannot be argued with. No one said anything, so there is nothing to dispute, nothing to point to later, no evidence. Only a child who felt the temperature drop and knew exactly what it meant. The most unsettling part is how alive that look still is. Someone glances at you a certain way now, in a meeting, across a kitchen, and your whole body responds before your mind arrives, flooding with a dread that belongs to a different decade. They meant nothing by it, but a face from your childhood has just walked into the room, and your nervous system does not know the difference. The voice that speaks first. The voice that speaks first is the one that gets to define reality. Something happens, a mistake, a rejection, a piece of criticism, and before you have had any chance to think, a verdict arrives, instant and certain. Of course. Typical. You always do this. It is faster than thought, which is exactly why you believe it. What makes this so quietly deceptive is that speed feels like truth. A reaction that arrives that fast seems to come from somewhere deeper than opinion, so you treat it as insight rather than as what it is. A groove worn smooth by 30 years of repetition. The most unsettling part is that the voice gets the first word, and therefore the last. By the time any fairer perspective shows up, the verdict is already in, the feeling has already landed, and the case is closed. You are not judging yourself, you are being judged by something that got there first and never had to prove a thing. The compliment you cannot keep. The compliment you cannot keep is one of the strangest symptoms of an early inner critic. Someone praises you sincerely, and you watch yourself deflect it, minimize it, explain why it does not count, and by evening, it is gone entirely, while a single piece of criticism from the same day is still fully intact. What makes this so quietly unfair is that it is not modesty. It is a filter. The critic screens incoming information, admits anything that confirms the old verdict, and rejects anything that contradicts it, so praise cannot get in, structurally, no matter how much of it arrives. The most unsettling part is what this means about the future. You cannot be complimented out of this. No amount of external evidence will reach the belief, because the belief controls what counts as evidence, and it was installed by someone whose opinion you can no longer even consult, in a house you cannot return to, about a child who no longer exists. The success you explain away. The success you explain away is what happens when achievement meets an old belief. You accomplish something real, and immediately the mind gets to work. It was luck. The timing was good. They were being nice. Anyone could have done it. What makes this so quietly maddening is the consistency of the accounting. Every failure is proof of your character, and every success is proof of circumstance. And this ledger has been running so long that you have decades of evidence that you are not much, assembled entirely by rigged bookkeeping. The most unsettling part is that success actually makes it worse. Each achievement is a new thing to be exposed for, a new gap between what people think and what you believe you are. So the anxiety climbs with the accomplishments. You built the thing. You did the work. And you are standing in the middle of your own life, feeling like a guest who has not yet been asked to leave. The kindness you refuse yourself. The kindness you refuse yourself is the double standard at the center of everything. Your friend fails at something and you know exactly what to say. Warm, fair, generous, true. You would never speak to them the way you speak to yourself, and if someone did, you would end the friendship. What makes this so quietly revealing is that you clearly have the capacity for compassion. It is not missing. It is simply, categorically, not available to one specific person. The most unsettling part is why. A child raised on conditional love learns that kindness must be earned, and they never quite believe they have earned it. So self-compassion feels illegitimate, like taking something you have not paid for. So you extend it endlessly outward, to everyone, generously, and keep none, and call the arrangement humility, when it is really a child still waiting to be told they are allowed. The judge who never sleeps. The judge who never sleeps is the exhausting part nobody sees. It is not that you are judged sometimes. It is that court is always in session, all day, every day, running quietly under everything you do, evaluating your sentences as you speak them, your work as you make it, your face in photographs, your performance in a conversation that ended 2 hours ago. What makes this so quietly draining is that the trial has no verdict. You are never found innocent, never released, never done, and there is no appeal, because the judge is inside the building. The most unsettling part is that you have never known anything else. You do not experience this as unusual. You assume everyone lives under this kind of surveillance, that this is simply what having a mind is like, and you may go your entire life without discovering that some people, somewhere, are simply doing things without being watched by anyone at all. The voice you mistake for truth. The voice you mistake for truth is the whole architecture of this chapter, standing in one place. Everything in it, the critic, the standard, the name, the look, works because of a single confusion, that you believe the voice is you. If it were clearly someone else's, you could argue with it. But it speaks in the first person. It uses your own accent. It arrives instantly, and it feels less like an opinion than like reality. What makes this so quietly total is that a belief you cannot see cannot be questioned. The most unsettling part is also the loosest thread. The voice is not you, and there is a way to hear it. Notice the tone. Notice the phrasing. Notice that it says the same 7 things it has always said. You cannot fight it, and you do not have to, because the moment you hear it as a voice rather than as the truth, it stops being the ground you stand on and becomes what it always was, a recording, playing in an empty room, made by someone who is never qualified to describe you. The body that still braces. The body that still braces is the part of a childhood that no amount of understanding seems to reach. You can know your history. You can explain your parents with great insight, and your shoulders will still climb toward your ears when a door closes too hard. What makes this so quietly stubborn is that the body did not learn any of this through thought, so thought cannot unlearn it. A child in an unpredictable house does not decide to be tense. Their nervous system simply adjusts its baseline upward and leaves it there, because a system that expects danger survives danger better. The most unsettling part is how long a baseline lasts. The house is gone. The people are old or dead or harmless. And your body is still running the settings it chose at 9, still slightly ready, every day, for something that finished decades ago. You are not being dramatic. You are being protected, tirelessly, by a system that was never told the war ended. The startle you never outgrew. The startle you never outgrew is one of the clearest fingerprints of a loud childhood. Someone drops a plate, and you are out of your skin, heart hammering, and everyone laughs about how jumpy you are. What makes this so quietly revealing is what a startle response actually measures. It is not nerves, it is calibration. A body that has learned sudden noise means something bad is coming will fire before the mind can assess anything, because in a house where a raised voice preceded worse, half a second mattered. The most unsettling part is the embarrassment that follows. You apologize for it. You laugh at yourself. Nobody around you sees that they have just watched a very old warning system do exactly the job it was built for, faithfully, at full volume, in a kitchen where nothing at all was going to happen. The footsteps you learned to read. The footsteps you learned to read are one of the strangest skills a child can develop. You knew from the hallway. Not from the face, not from the words, from the footsteps, from the weight and rhythm of them on the stairs, and you knew what kind of evening it would be before anyone entered the room. What makes this so quietly extraordinary is how much processing that takes. A child in an unpredictable house builds a sensory model of an entire adult, running constantly, below awareness, gathering data from sound, from breath, from the pause before a door opens. The most unsettling part is that the model never got deleted. You still read people this way, instantly, involuntarily, from a cough in another room, from the way someone sets down their keys, and it feels like intuition. And it is really a child on a landing, listening, working out how much time they have. The shoulders that never drop. The shoulders that never drop are where a childhood goes to live. Someone tells you to relax them, and you do, and 40 seconds later they are back up, and you did not notice them climbing. What makes this so quietly permanent is that this is not a habit, it is a posture, and postures are built over years. A child who is braced holds themselves braced, and muscle adapts to what it is asked to do, so the position stops requiring effort and starts being the resting state. The most unsettling part is that you cannot feel it as tension anymore. Tension implies a contrast, a relaxed version to compare against, and you may not have one. So when a massage therapist tells you that you are carrying a great deal, you are genuinely surprised, because what they are describing as pain is what you have always simply called being a person. The breath you hold in rooms. The breath you hold in rooms is one of the most invisible things a body remembers. Watch yourself in a tense conversation. Notice that you are not breathing, or barely, high in the chest, silently, and that you did not choose it. What makes this so quietly telling is why children stop breathing. A held breath is a small act of hiding. It makes you quieter, smaller, less present. And a child in a room they wanted to disappear from learns to do it without ever being taught. The most unsettling part is where it shows up now. Not in danger, in ordinary life, in a meeting, in a doctor's office. When someone you love goes quiet, your body reads the room, decides that this is a moment to be less visible, and holds, and you emerge from it later with a headache and no idea why, having spent an hour trying not to exist. The stomach that knows first. The stomach that knows first is one of the most reliable narrators of a difficult childhood. Something is wrong, and you feel it there before you think it. A drop, a tightening, a wrongness that arrives ahead of any information. What makes this so quietly clever is that this is not mystical. Your gut is densely wired to your nervous system, and a body trained to detect threat routes the alarm through it, so a stomach can register a change in someone's mood well before the mind has a sentence for it. The most unsettling part is the confusion it causes now. You feel it in situations that are perfectly safe, and you cannot tell whether it is a genuine warning or an old reflex misfiring. So you either ignore your instincts entirely or trust them too much. Somewhere in there is real information, and somewhere in there is a 9-year-old at a dinner table, and you have never been able to tell which is speaking. The rest that feels unsafe. The rest that feels unsafe is one of the cruelest legacies of an unpredictable house. You finally have a free afternoon, nothing to do, nowhere to be, and instead of relief, you feel a low, creeping unease, and eventually you get up and find something to fix. What makes this so quietly trapping is the logic underneath it. In a house where bad things arrived without warning, vigilance was safety, and rest was the state you were in when it happened. So, the body learned to associate stillness with exposure. The most unsettling part is that it looks like a personality trait. You call yourself restless, driven, bad at holidays. Everyone admires your energy. Nobody sees that you cannot sit down, because sitting down is when your nervous system starts scanning the horizon, and it has never, in your whole life, come back with an all clear. The sleep you never fully enter. The sleep you never fully enter is what happens when the night was not safe. You sleep, technically, but lightly, and near the surface, waking at sounds, dreaming thinly, rising unrested. What makes this so quietly costly is that sleep depth is not a choice. It is a permission the nervous system grants, and it only grants it when the environment reads as safe. A child who listened for footsteps at night, or for raised voices, or for a door, taught their system that full unconsciousness is a risk. The most unsettling part is how long the setting holds. You may be 40, alone, in a locked flat, in total silence, and some part of you is still on duty, keeping one ear open, holding you just above the depth where real rest begins. Because a child in another decade decided that going all the way under was not something you could afford. The door you sit facing. The door you sit facing is one of those habits you never noticed until someone pointed it out. You take the seat with the view of the room. You dislike having your back to an entrance. In a restaurant, you rearrange yourself without thinking, and you would describe it, if asked, as a preference. What makes this so quietly revealing is that it is not a preference. It is positioning. And positioning is what a body does when it needs to see what is coming. The most unsettling part is how tidy it looks from outside. You are simply a person who likes that chair. Nobody watching you settle into a cafe sees the small, silent piece of strategy taking place, or knows that a child learned somewhere that being surprised was the worst thing that could happen, and quietly arranged the rest of your life so it would not happen again. The illness that let you rest. The illness that let you rest is one of the saddest bargains a childhood can produce. When you were sick, things changed. The house softened. You were allowed to lie down, to be looked after, to stop performing, and the warmth you could not access any other way arrived with a temperature. What makes this so quietly formative is what a child concludes from that. Not consciously, never consciously, but somewhere the equation is written. To deserve care, you must be visibly broken. The most unsettling part is how it plays out now. You may run yourself to the point of collapse before you will take a day off, because ordinary tiredness does not qualify, and you feel a strange, guilty relief when you finally get properly ill. It is the only permission slip you were ever issued, and your body still remembers how to write one. The tiredness sleep cannot touch. The tiredness sleep cannot touch is the one that confuses your doctor. You sleep 8 hours and wake exhausted. Your tests come back fine. And you carry a fatigue that has no bottom, that a holiday does not fix, that feels older than your life. What makes this so quietly heavy is what it actually is. This is not a sleep debt. It is a running cost. A nervous system held at alert for 30 years is doing work, constantly, invisibly, and that work is metabolically expensive, and no night's rest can repay a bill that is still being generated every waking hour. The most unsettling part is that you have never known the alternative. You cannot miss a baseline you never had, so you assume this is what being alive costs, that everyone is this tired, that this is simply adulthood. And you keep looking for a night of sleep that will fix it, in a body that is not short of sleep at all. The body that still remembers. The body that still remembers is the whole of this chapter, and the part people find hardest to accept. You did the work. You understand your childhood. You can discuss it calmly, with insight, even with compassion for the people involved. And your body has not been informed. What makes this so quietly separating is that these are two different systems. Insight lives in one place, and the startle, the held breath, the shoulders, the shallow sleep, live somewhere much older and much less interested in your conclusions. The most unsettling part is what that means about the timeline. You cannot think your way to a lowered baseline, and no realization, however profound, will tell your body that the house is empty now. It learns another way, slowly, through experience, through years of nothing bad happening, and it is doing that in its own time, faithfully, without asking you, still standing a watch that no one has ever formally dismissed it from. The adult who cannot be helped. The adult who cannot be helped is one of the most invisible outcomes of an early childhood conclusion. Someone offers you a hand, sincerely, and something in you refuses before you have considered it. You say you have got it. You do not need anything. And you mean it, which is the strange part. What makes this so quietly isolating is that the refusal is not pride, it is arithmetic. A child who reached out and found nobody there did the sum, and the sum said that hoping costs more than carrying, so they stopped hoping and started carrying. The most unsettling part is what it does to the people who love you. They want to help. They offer, repeatedly, and you decline, gently, every time, and eventually they stop offering. And you notice they stopped, and something in you says quietly, "Of course." You have proven the theory again, using a rule that made the proof inevitable, and the loneliness you feel now is genuinely, painfully real, and it is being maintained by a 9-year-old who was right, once, about a house that no longer exists. The partner who waits to be left. The partner who waits to be left is one of the saddest ways love goes wrong. You are with someone good. Things are fine. And you are braced, every day, quietly, for the moment it ends, reading their tone, watching for the shift, certain it is coming even when nothing suggests it. What makes this so quietly destructive is that the vigilance is not neutral. You cannot watch someone for signs of leaving without changing how you are with them. You get guarded, or clingy, or you test them, or you hold a piece of yourself back, so the eventual loss will not take all of you. The most unsettling part is what that does over years. A person cannot be fully loved by someone who is watching the door, and eventually the distance you built for protection becomes a real distance, and if they do go, the prophecy closes, and you will never know that the abandonment you feared was not waiting in them. It was waiting in a house you grew up in, and you brought it with you. The friend who never asks. The friend who never asks is one of the loneliest people in any friendship. You are the one everyone calls. You are excellent in a crisis. You remember the details. You check in. And you have never once brought them something heavy of your own. What makes this so quietly one-sided is that it looks like generosity. And it is, partly, and it is also a wall. If you are always the helper, you are never the helped, and the position is safe, because a person who gives cannot be rejected for needing. The most unsettling part is what it costs the friendship. Your friends do not actually know you. They know a warm, capable listener, and they would gladly hold your weight if you handed them any, and you never do. And so the closeness you crave stays permanently out of reach, guarded by a strategy that a child invented to make sure they would never again ask for something and be met with nothing. The worker who cannot stop. The worker who cannot stop is the wound most likely to be praised. You are the reliable one, the one who over-delivers, the one who is still going when everyone else has finished. And it is rewarded everywhere with money and titles and admiration, which makes it almost impossible to see. What makes this so quietly consuming is what is actually driving it. This is not ambition. Ambition has a destination. This is a child still trying to be useful enough to be kept, and that child has no finish line because the thing they are working for was never on offer, and no promotion has ever contained it. The most unsettling part is what happens when you succeed. The relief lasts about a day. Then the floor resets, and you need the next thing, and the next. And you may spend 40 years climbing a structure built entirely out of a feeling you had at 7 and arrive at the top, exhausted, to find that it is not there either. The person who says yes too fast. The person who says yes too fast is one of the most agreeable people you will ever meet, and one of the most quietly resentful. Someone asks for your time, and the yes is out before you have checked whether you have any. It is not a decision. It is a reflex, and reflexes do not consult your calendar or your energy or your own life. What makes this so quietly draining is that each yes is small, and the total is enormous. No single agreement is unreasonable, and together they eat your week, and you cannot point to the moment it happened. The most unsettling part is where the resentment goes. You cannot blame the people who asked, they only asked, so it turns inward, or it leaks out sideways at the people you love most, and you sit in a life you did not choose, built entirely out of individually reasonable moments where a child decided that refusing someone was more dangerous than disappearing. The one who chooses the familiar. The one who chooses the familiar is the pattern that makes people ask why you keep picking the same person. Different name, different face, same weather. The unavailable one, the critical one, the one who runs hot and cold. And your friends cannot understand it, and neither can you, because you are not attracted to the pain. What makes this so quietly powerful is that the nervous system does not sort people into good and bad. It sorts them into familiar and unfamiliar, and familiar reads as safe, even when familiar was never safe. Someone kind and steady can feel flat, boring, wrong, because they do not activate the system you were tuned on. The most unsettling part is what that means about chemistry. That instant, electric recognition you feel across a room is not always love arriving. Sometimes it is a child recognizing the shape of a house and calling it home, because that is the only word they were given for it. The apology in every sentence. The apology in every sentence is a habit so deep you have stopped hearing it. Sorry to bother you. Sorry, quick question. Sorry, I know you're busy. Sorry, this is probably stupid. You apologize for taking up airtime in a conversation you were invited into. What makes this so quietly self-erasing is what it teaches everyone, including you. Each unnecessary sorry is a small announcement that your presence is an imposition, and after a few thousand of them, people believe it. And worse, so do you. The most unsettling part is that nobody ever asked for this. The people around you would be startled to learn you feel like a burden. They simply see someone who apologizes a lot. And you are still saying it, all day, every day, to a room that never once objected to you being in it, on behalf of a child who was told, somehow, that they were too much. The distance you call independence. The distance you call independence is the wound that wears the best disguise. You do not need anyone. You handle your own things. You are proud of it, and everyone respects it, and it is genuinely useful. And it is also a wall, built by a child. What makes this so quietly convincing is that independence is a virtue, so nobody questions it, including you. Nobody looks at a self-sufficient adult and asks what happened to make self-sufficiency necessary that early. The most unsettling part is what it forecloses. Intimacy requires need. To be truly close to someone is to let them matter, to be affected, to hand over a piece of your well-being, and a person who cannot need cannot do that. So, you have many relationships and very little closeness, and you call it being strong, and you go home alone with a strength you never actually chose. The anger that comes out sideways. The anger that comes out sideways is what happens to a feeling with nowhere legitimate to go. You are never angry. You are calm, reasonable, slow to react. And then you are unaccountably furious about a dish in the sink, or coldly sarcastic in a way that surprises you, or you go quiet for 2 days over something small. What makes this so quietly confusing is the mismatch. The size of the reaction never fits the size of the trigger, because the reaction is not about the trigger. It is 30 years of unexpressed anger finally finding a crack small enough to be safe. The most unsettling part is who receives it. Never the person who earned it. They are gone, or too powerful, or too loved. It lands on whoever is closest and safest, usually the people you would least want to hurt. And afterwards you cannot explain it, and you apologize, and you file it away as further evidence that something is wrong with you. The parent you swore not to be. The parent you swore not to be is the moment that stops people cold. You promised yourself at 11 with total clarity that you would never do that. Never say that sentence. Never use that tone. And then one day you are tired, and it is out of your mouth before you hear it, in exactly the voice you swore off, and you go cold. What makes this so quietly frightening is that intention is not the mechanism. You did not learn parenting from a decision. You learned it from a house. Absorbed through years of watching, and under stress, a body reaches for what is installed, not what is intended. The most unsettling part is the mercy hidden in it. Noticing is not failing. The parent who wounded you almost certainly never heard themselves, and you did. And that difference is not nothing. It is, in fact, the whole difference. And it arrived because a child paid attention. The love you cannot quite receive. The love you cannot quite receive is the cruelest arithmetic in this chapter. It is here. Someone loves you steadily, without conditions, and you can see it, and it does not land. It touches the surface and slides off, and you go on feeling unloved in the middle of being loved, which is a specific kind of loneliness with no one to blame. What makes this so quietly heartbreaking is that the container was shaped early. A child who learned love is earned builds a vessel with a hole in it, and no amount of pouring fills a vessel like that. So the person loving you can do everything right and still not reach you. The most unsettling part is what they experience. They feel like they are failing, and they are not, and you cannot explain it, because the explanation lives in a house neither of you has ever been in together, where a child concluded that love always comes with an invoice, and quietly stopped believing in gifts. The success that changed nothing. The success that changed nothing is the discovery that ends a lot of ambition. You got there. The thing you were working toward, the achievement that was going to settle it, and it arrived. And for a moment there was something. And then, by Tuesday, nothing. The same feeling. The same low hum. What makes this so quietly devastating is that you had been sustained by the belief that arriving would fix it. That was the engine. And the achievement is the one thing capable of disproving it. So success is the only experience that can take the hope away. The most unsettling part is what it reveals about the target. You were never chasing the promotion. You were chasing a moment from decades ago where someone looked at you and was simply glad you existed, for no reason, without a report card, and no accomplishment in the world can be delivered backward to a child who needed it then. The adult explaining a child. The adult explaining a child is what this entire chapter has been describing. Everything in it. The refusing help. The fast yes. The wall you call independence. The anger sideways. All of it looks like personality. You describe yourself with these traits. Your friends would list them at your funeral. What makes this so quietly total is the disguise. A strategy repeated for 30 years stops feeling like a strategy, and you will defend these things as who you are because you have never known yourself without them. The most unsettling part is also the opening. None of it was chosen. Every one of these was an intelligent solution, built by a small person, under pressure, with the information available for a house you no longer live in. They worked. That is why you are here. And nobody ever went back to tell that child that the emergency had ended, that the solutions could be set down, and that the person they became to survive is not the same as the person they are. The wound you cannot name. The wound you cannot name is the hardest one to carry because nothing happened. There was no event. Nobody hit you. Nobody left. You had a house, food, a bed, parents who were, by any visible measure, fine. And still, something is wrong, and has been your whole life, and you have no story to explain it. What makes this so quietly isolating is that pain without evidence gets no standing. You cannot point to anything, so you conclude the problem must be you, that you are simply weak or ungrateful or broken for no reason. The most unsettling part is that absence leaves no marks. What happened to you was not an event. It was 1,000 non-events, the times nobody asked, the feelings nobody named, the arms that never quite opened. A child cannot testify to what they never received because they do not know it was supposed to be there. And so you carry something real and unprovable and spend your life apologizing for a grief that has no receipt. The story you tell about it. The story you tell about it is the one you have polished for years. It was fine. They did their best. It was a different time. Other people had it much worse. You can deliver it smoothly, without emotion, and it sounds reasonable because it is reasonable, and every sentence in it may be true. What makes this so quietly effective is that the story is not a lie, it is a lid. A child needed to keep the people they depended on good, so they built an account of their childhood that protected everyone, and they built it before they had any capacity to judge it, and then they never revised it. The most unsettling part is the tell. Watch what happens when you tell the story and someone says, gently, "That sounds hard." Something moves. Something in your chest catches for a second before the lid closes again. That flicker is the actual truth, still in there, and it has been trying to get a word in for 30 years. The loyalty to those who hurt you. The loyalty to those who hurt you is the thing that makes no sense from the outside and total sense from within. You defend them. You explain them. You get uncomfortable, even angry, when someone else criticizes them, and you cannot fully say why. What makes this so quietly binding is what loyalty was for. A child cannot afford to see their caregivers clearly, to be small and dependent, and conclude that the people keeping you alive are dangerous is unbearable, so the mind does the only thing it can. It protects them and blames itself instead. It is safer to be a bad child in a good house than a good child in an unsafe one. The most unsettling part is that the arrangement never expired. You are an adult, safe, independent, and still you rush to their defense, still soften the story, still take the blame, honoring a bargain a 5-year-old made in order to be able to keep loving the only people they had. The grief you never allowed. The grief you never allowed is the piece almost everyone skips. You may understand your childhood now. You may have read about it, spoken about it, explained it with real insight, and you have never actually mourned it. What makes this so quietly incomplete is that understanding is not grieving. Insight happens in the mind, and grief happens somewhere else. And a person can spend a decade analyzing their family without ever once crying about it. The most unsettling part is what there is to grieve. Not a person. They may be alive, and that is what makes it strange. You are mourning something that never existed. The parent you needed, the childhood you did not get, the version of yourself who would have grown up held. There is no funeral for that. No one sends flowers. And so it sits, unmourned, indefinitely, a loss with no ceremony and no permission, waiting for a night quiet enough to finally be felt. The parent who cannot hear it. The parent who cannot hear it is the wall many people find when they finally speak. You gathered your courage. You said the true thing, carefully, without accusation, and they could not receive it. They got defensive or hurt, or they cried until you were comforting them, or they simply do not remember it that way. What makes this so quietly crushing is what you were actually asking for. Not an apology, really. Acknowledgement. To be believed. To have one person say, yes, that happened, and it was not right. The most unsettling part is why they cannot give it. Often it is not malice. To acknowledge what they did, they would have to feel it, and they may not have the capacity, may never have had it, may be running from their own house from 50 years ago. And so you are left holding the truth alone, and their inability to hear it is not evidence that it did not happen. It is the same limitation that caused it. The apology that never came. The apology that never came is the debt that stays open forever. You have imagined it. The conversation where they finally understand, where they say the sentence you have been waiting your whole life to hear. You have rehearsed their words. You know exactly how it would land. What makes this so quietly relentless is that the fantasy keeps the wound open. Every time you rehearse the apology, You renew your investment in getting it. And so the healing gets outsourced to someone who has shown you repeatedly that they will not deliver. The most unsettling part is the price of waiting. Some apologies are never coming. Not because you do not deserve one, you do entirely, but because the person capable of giving it does not exist and may never have. And so you stand at a door for decades, holding a debt that is real and uncollectible, and the only thing more painful than the apology not arriving is how long you can wait for it. The forgiveness you were told to give. The forgiveness you were told to give is one of the loneliest pressures put on a wounded person. Everyone has an opinion. You should forgive for your own sake. Let it go. Life is short. They are getting old. And underneath the advice is something that is really about them, that your unresolved pain is uncomfortable to be around. What makes this so quietly unfair is the timing. Forgiveness that arrives on demand, before the anger has been felt, before the grief has been allowed, is not forgiveness. It is another performance. One more way to be easy for everyone else. The most unsettling part is what the pressure asks you to skip. You cannot let go of something you have never been permitted to hold. And whatever comes eventually, whether that is forgiveness or distance or a quiet peace with no label, it is not something anyone can hand you on a schedule, and no one else gets a vote in when it arrives. The child still waiting inside. The child still waiting inside is the strangest fact in this whole chapter. Some part of you is still 8, still in that house, still waiting for someone to come. Not metaphorically, functionally. That is who reacts when a door closes hard, who panics at a message left unanswered, who cannot accept a compliment, who says yes before you have decided. What makes this so quietly persistent is that they were never told it was over. Nobody came into that room and said, "The emergency has ended. You can stop now. You are safe." So they stayed at their post, doing their job, for 30 or 40 years, running the whole operation with information from a house that has since been sold. The most unsettling part is how well they did. Every strategy in this video was theirs. They read the room, kept the peace, went quiet, stayed useful, and they got you out. And they have never once been thanked or relieved or noticed, and they are still in there, working tonight. The moment you see the pattern. The moment you see the pattern is the quiet turn this whole thing has been moving toward. It usually arrives sideways. You are doing something ordinary, apologizing for nothing, saying yes when you meant no, bracing at a change in someone's tone, and for a second you see it. Not as your personality, as a pattern, something learned in a specific place for a specific reason. What makes this so quietly powerful is how little it demands. You do not have to fix it. You cannot fix it tonight, and nothing about tonight requires fixing. Seeing is not solving, and seeing is not nothing either. The most releasing part is what the seeing does to the grip. A pattern you cannot see runs you. A pattern you can see is still there, still strong, still automatic. But there is now a small gap between you and it. Half a second of daylight. And everything that ever changes for anyone starts in that gap, quietly, over years, without any effort tonight at all. The weight you set down slowly. The weight you set down slowly is not put down all at once, and it never was. Nobody wakes up one morning and is free of a childhood. It goes the way it came, gradually, in 1,000 small moments, most of them unnoticed. A day you did not apologize. A moment you asked for something, A time you let someone help and nothing bad happened. None of it feels like progress while it is happening. It feels like nothing. And that is exactly what it looks like when a body slowly learns that the house is empty, that the footsteps are not coming, that the room is safe now. You are not behind. There is no schedule for this, and nothing is required of you tonight. And the weight you have carried this long is allowed to be set down one small piece at a time, in whatever order it chooses. Over years, you do not have to plan. The kindness you finally allow. The kindness you finally allow is the one thing that child never got, and the only one still available. Not from them. That door may stay closed, and no amount of waiting will open it. But you are here, and you know exactly what that child needed, better than anyone alive, because you were there. It is very simple, and it is not a technique, and it does not need to be done properly. It is only a turning toward, a willingness to speak to yourself the way you would speak to any small person who did their best in a difficult house. You do not have to feel it tonight. You do not have to mean it yet. It is enough, for now, to know that the kindness exists, that it was always allowed, and that you were never the one thing in your life that did not deserve it. The rest you are allowed to take. The rest you are allowed to take is where this ends. Nothing has to be solved tonight. Nothing has to be understood, or forgiven, or worked through, or decided. The child inside you can put it down for a few hours. The watch can go unstood. The house is quiet now, and it has been quiet for a long time, and the footsteps are not coming. There is nothing left to earn, nothing to be useful for, nothing to be good enough for. Not tonight. You do not have to be anything at all. You are allowed to simply be here, in the dark, breathing, warm, done for the day. Let it all go soft. Let it get far away. There is nothing to do now but rest, and you have been allowed to, all along.